This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
We came, we saw, and now we're here. It's pretty much my entire review of the 2024 Royal Rumble. We can now look forward to WrestleMania 40, where the real magic happens. The magic being, how much more can they drag out a card longer than absolutely necessary? I mean, I thought the days of the 4-hour WWE pay-per-views were done and over with. What happened to the shows they were doing last year? Wasn't Survivor Series something like 3 hours on the dot? Didn't overstay its welcome. And now all of a sudden they're back to running these 4+ hour marathons where most of the people are gassed by hour 3. And yet they wonder why nothing gets a reaction past a certain point. So we'll talk about the Rumble in just a minute here. Got plenty to say about it. But I do want to make sure I get some intro stuff out of the way briefly. First, make sure you all subscribe to the FSWR channel if you have not done so already. We are on YouTube and Rumble every Monday and Friday for new content. Today's going to be one of those hodgepodge shows where we're going to cover a lot of WWF and WWE content, but we're also going to be jumping all over the time machine. We'll do some modern WWE talk with this Royal Rumble recap. We'll do some classic 90s WWF Raw talk. Then we'll jump ahead to the mid-2010s and talk about the horrors of the black and gold brand with NXT. Plenty of entertaining material to cover on this one. And if you're a fan of the classic material in particular on the channel, make sure you also stop by every Friday for the continuation of the retro content. The Friday show is where we cover a lot of the classic territory footage and the NWA Crockett TV on the Superstation. So you've got a nice little variety of flavor here on the channel. That's the goal. And for those of you that like the classic AEW rants, well, you got those memories archived on the channel for eternity. But that's in the past. Kind of like how the Royal Rumble is now in the past. With plenty of brain fog to come out of it when it was over. So this Royal Rumble show, I had a revelation when I was watching this event over the weekend. Notice how I still call it an event. I really don't even know what I'm supposed to call these things. I mean, they're not pay-per-views, because I'm not physically going to my cable provider and ordering a service through my television. It's, I guess you can call it a streaming event. I mean, WWE still calls them premium live specials, but it's too much of a mouthful, so I like to try to simplify it. The point is, and I can't remember who I was listening to, might have been one of Jim Cornette's podcasts, and he and Brian were talking about something that I've also caught on to in the wrestling business just within the last several years. And it's the whole basic idea, especially with WWE content, where the wrestling matches are always subordinate to the thing that really matters on these programs a lot of the time, which are the promos, the talking segments. The only thing that really grips or hooks viewers at this stage in the game. And I think that's why when the show was over, the only thing I kept mulling over in my head over and over again was just how disappointing it was. Like, I could easily say the show was boring, but I think a more accurate interpretation for me would just be to call the 2024 Royal Rumble disappointing. And why is that? Why was I left so underwhelmed? Even though the finish to the men's Rumble was completely logical and made all the sense in the world from a storyline standpoint, even though they pretty much did everything that I anticipated they would. And then it hit me. You know, I'd watched some of those Raw clips with guys like Drew McIntyre and CM Punk, McIntyre and Cody, Cody and Punk, all those little verbal exchanges they were doing. They spent like 10 minutes jaw-jacking back and forth, going over their history, giving their backstories, you know, really trying to sell the meaning and implication of the Royal Rumble match, why everything matters. And I even thought to myself in many of those instances, you know, these are really damn good promos. There's a lot of passion and vigor behind these. They're captivating the attention of the audience. People are really invested in these personalities. The audience sees these guys as big stars and big attractions. And then the match happens. And it's like, I couldn't help but think back to what Jim and Brian were talking about on their podcast, where it's like, the talking segments are so strong a lot of the time, but when you get to the actual payoff of seeing them touch, it doesn't have the same energy as the promo stuff. And that really seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? How is it that a professional wrestling show has wrestling matches that are far and away inferior to the promos and talk segments? How does that happen? And the answer is that, you know, as Jim and Brian have indicated on their channel, as I've indicated, having watched many of these SmackDown shows and me skipping over the majority of the matches because none of them ever matter, the matches really are inferior. They don't matter. They're placeholder material to fill time until we get to the actual stuff that matters on the show. What usually winds up being the talking segments. Like, even the angles are usually blasé in comparison to the promo work. Especially with all the windmill punching we see these days. So where am I going with all this? You know, what does this have to do with the Royal Rumble? Well, after seeing the supposed payoff to the TV build where all the top guys had staked their claim as to why they were going to win the Rumble match, you know, even when we got to the point of seeing Punk and Cody actually get physical at the end of the men's Rumble match, really the only thing I had a vested interest in seeing it to begin with, after seeing it actually go down, I don't know. Maybe it's because the expectations were so high after having heard the promo battle on Raw last week. The actual wrestling between the two just didn't hold up. And the same can be said for the work that was done between Drew and Punk or Drew and Cody. And like, man, even the Kevin Owens-Logan Paul match didn't hold up to the back and forth verbal jousting those guys were doing on television. And unfortunately, I think this is going to become a recurring problem with modern WWE in the coming months. Maybe even years. Because there's such a heavy emphasis on star power and promo ability, when the matches don't meet the expectations of the promo build-up, it's always going to leave you dissatisfied. Like, even when Cody eliminated Punk at the very end, it didn't really have that cathartic eruption from the fans. After everything they were doing to build up to this moment for the better part of, the last 8 or 9 months? Did the reaction really reflect any of that? Or was it just kind of like, okay, cool. It's kind of what we expected. And again, this could just be a reflection on the lackluster crowd because, I mean, they were pretty tired by the time we even got to the men's Rumble match. But even the pops for Cody and Punk's entrances were not particularly euphoric. I think by that point in the match, everyone was just kind of looking at their watch, wanting them to get to the end of it. Because we were already pushing midnight by the time everything wrapped up with Cody winning. Oh, by the way, spoiler for anybody that hasn't already seen the show. I suspect most people have. I mean, you can't hide anything with wrestling anymore, especially with social media. But, that's sort of my pre-Rumble tangent before I even get into anything. And I figure I bring it up now instead of saving it for the end because, I want to try to hook people from the beginning here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just that jaded as a wrestling fan anymore to where I just can't enjoy anything except in small doses. I mean, I had plenty of other issues with the show as a whole, aside from the predictability factor and the underwhelming nature of how everything came across in execution, much of which came within the first hour of the program. So, well, let's get into the card and see what fiascos await us on the other side. We open the show with the Girls' Rumble match. That was perfect for me because, I was still in the middle of prepping dinner when the show started. So at least I know I could have something on in the background for a while, but I didn't need to pay attention to anything that was happening in the ring. I'm at the point now where I don't even really think of the Girls' Rumble matches when they do them every year. Like, I used to bitch and complain about it all the time on the channel because, my constant joke was the next time I see a good women's Royal Rumble, it'll be the first. And I hate to be the party foul right out of the gate here, but this was no different from the rest of them. For what little action I actually paid attention to here, most of what I saw, by and large, was sloppy, lousy, and dreary. And those were just a few of the dwarves that I ran into along the way. But I had at least a good 25 minutes where I could tune most of it out and wait for all the job girls to get canned. Because let's be blunt, like 80% of these girls were job girls. By the way, did I hear Michael Cole at one point declare that there's never been a co-Rumble winner? I can't even remember the context for it, but I could have sworn I heard him say that we've never had two Royal Rumble winners before. I had my earpiece in when I was listening to it from the kitchen, so I wasn't watching it, but did we completely neglect the year 1994? Is Luger still in the doghouse after all these years? They're still giving him the Benoit treatment, apparently. So I'll just go ahead and rally off a few things and note here. It won't take long. It was interesting seeing Jordynne Grace make a cameo. I'm sure Jim will have a ball with that one when he does his Rumble review. Looks like she's dropped a little bit of weight since the last time I saw her. Good on her. Guess I can't call her Thunder Thighs anymore. They did recognize her as the TNA Knockouts champion, so that working relationship is apparently still in good hands. I like how they basically coined Chelsea Green their female version of R-Truth at this point. A complete cartoon parody that nobody takes seriously and is basically just there to get a laugh out of everybody. It's, I mean, to be honest, if you follow Chelsea's track record since they made her a crazy zombie wife in TNA years ago, well, it's kind of what she's always been. Speaking of truth, yeah, he's still a fucking idiot after all these years. All that CTE buildup, and now he's coming out thinking he's a part of the Women's Royal Rumble. Because Truth has apparently never seen a set of breasts before. He actually outright asked Adam Pearce here, "You mean those are girls in there?" What a fucking moron. But this is where we've come in modern day WWE. Now the Royal Rumble is just a series of comedy spots, one after the other. I mean, the whole thing's a parody at this point. I think the one person people were holding out hope would make a return here was Sasha, or whatever her name is now, Mercedes Money. Well, she didn't return here. Her former comrade Naomi did. She came out at number 2 during the first set of ring entrances, and the people popped for that pretty considerably. But, that's sort of the main selling point with the Rumble matches anymore, isn't it? They really kind of popularized this just within the last 5 or so years, where it's more so about the surprise entries and people just sort of waiting to see who shows up. It's not really about the drama of seeing anybody go the distance or anything like that. It's just, we're going to count down with the clock, turn our attention toward the entryway to see who shows up, and 99% of the time we'll be disappointed because it's some chick we don't give a crap about. Which is pretty much what happened here. I mean, there were a lot of girls I've never even seen before here. A lot of NXT names, I presume. Most of whom should have been kept as far away from a ring as humanly possible, because boy, were a lot of them fucking rotten. It was funny kind of seeing some of those core black and gold brand names get totally disregarded. Like, remember when Mia Yim and Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell and even Botchsy were like some of the more over girls during that old Hunter regime? Now most of those NXT fans are drooling over AEW's cesspool of roster suck. So this new crop of WWE fans, they see them, but they're like, yeah, we don't give a shit about them. And why would they? I mean, I like Mia, but Candice was always garbage. Botchsy, I've said plenty about her in the past. Like, she's one of the more outlaw, rotten girls they've got under contract in that company. I can't believe they're still paying that fucking bimbo. And then there's the other new group of gals that they're training, and yeesh. Some of them are, well, to kindly put it, probably not cut out for the sport. I know it's a little early to prejudge some of them, but, this business is not for everybody. Keep that in mind. So pretty much where I actually started paying closer attention was when it came down to Liv Bayley and Jade Cargill. And it was pretty much a toss-up between either Jade or Bayley at that point. But given where they've been going with the story on SmackDown with her and the rest of Damage Control, I mean, Bayley kind of had to win this. Would have been kind of interesting to see Jade win, just for that sort of upset oh shit factor and the potential of seeing her wrestle maybe a Rhea Ripley for the Raw Women's title. But, well, I mean, let's be candid. She's definitely not ready for that spot yet. And I don't think they should be putting Rhea in that kind of predicament of having to carry Jade to a WrestleMania match. If they were able to mask her in an environment like this where she wasn't the sole focus of the entire segment for more than 1 or 2 minute increments, it was definitely the right time to debut her on the main roster. And while the stuff she did here wasn't necessarily bad, it's too tough to gauge her performance strictly based on her doing a few spots in a girls' Rumble match. Having her eliminate Nia Jagoff got a huge pop. Mostly because it's Nia, and nobody likes that rotund haystack. But it's not really a fair reflection on what Jade's capable of doing in the ring yet, because we haven't really seen her work a real match yet. We'll see if she ends up getting called to Raw or SmackDown in the coming weeks. Maybe they'll have her work a few squash matches. That'll be the first step in getting her more TV exposure, kind of like what AEW was doing once upon a time. The only difference is WWE will be more consistent with actually featuring her like a star, instead of what Tony Khan did with her for 3 years by having her work sloppy matches with green girls that nobody gave a fuck about. But, yeah, Bayley ended up eliminating Jade and Liv, almost in back-to-back fashion. There's a little too much apron brawling going on at the end for my liking, but, I mean, it played into the story of what they were going for. After Kairi and Asuka got eliminated earlier, their original plan fell through, so it basically left Bayley to fend for herself for over an hour and try to outlast the gauntlet. And she did just that. Won the thing pretty much clean with no bullshit. No one from Damage Control to come back out to help her. She did it alone. And Io Sky was not too happy about it. But it's definitely getting over that slow burn babyface turn. You know, I think people are definitely going to go crazy for that when it finally happens. So, again, what they did wasn't bad. Made sense. The fact that it took an hour and 5 minutes to actually get there, where I basically had to tune out a bunch of crap in the middle, you know, it didn't make the experience any more enjoyable. I say it every year, and I'll continue to beat it over everybody's heads. These girls' Rumble matches are always death. I don't care what anybody says. They don't have enough talent to warrant them doing an entire 30-woman Rumble match, especially one that runs over an hour. It's painfully long every time they do it. And while I know there's always going to be that market of girls wrestling fans that try to argue with me about this, how big is that community? If you really think about it, it's a very small subset of an already deflated hardcore audience that watches WWE to begin with. I mean, you definitely have more casuals that'll watch regardless because it's WWE, but I still can't justify watching these all the way through. When I look up and see a wrestling ring filled with green job girls that have no business being in front of 40,000 plus fans, that shit rubs me the wrong way. It's more of this garbage DEI equality for all propaganda that the mainstream continues to shove down our fucking throats. And I have to point this out, because people are going to take this out of context. I don't hate women's wrestling. I just hate really bad women's wrestling that's presented to me in a way where I'm supposed to accept it because it feeds a narrative, regardless of how bad the wrestling itself is. That shit pisses me off. And it always will. But congratulations to Bayley. I'm proud of her. She's a good talent, strong worker. Always been a Bayley fan. And I think her and Io should have a pretty good match in Mania in a few months. So I'm actually looking forward to that. So following that, very oddly placed on the card, in the second tier slot, it's the Fatal 4-Way Universal Championship match with Randy Orton, AJ Styles, LA Knight, and Roman Reigns. And this is where I actually went to the Wikipedia page and realized, oh wow, there are only 4 matches booked for this card. There's the 2 Rumble matches, the U.S. title match, and this match. So I will, in fact, get to bed before midnight. Or so I thought. This was the title match sponsored by Scott Steiner Math, where the Tribal Chief only stood a 25% chance of retaining. But of course, we're discounting the fact that he's the Tribal Chief. So you obviously have to factor in God Mode active features, which brings Roman's chances of winning to around 77 2/3%. But then you add Roman's 25% chance to that 77 2/3%. Oh, that pretty much guarantees Roman has the match won before the bell rings. For the record, this was the kind of shit I was doing to try to entertain myself while it took them 18 goddamn hours to get through these ring introductions. Because it's WWE after all. So everything has to take an hour and a day. Which is probably a good summation of this entire match. I mean, when you really boil it down, it was a total foregone conclusion from the moment it was booked. Were there people that actually thought Roman was going to lose? God. I don't even know what to say to those people. Delusional. And man, like, even as I'm skimming over my notes of this match, like, I was really struggling to come up with anything to talk about beyond what I already mentioned about the predictability factor. A couple little things I noticed during the match. I mean, Roman pretty much got his ass beat the entire time. They actually did a series of spots where all three challengers got visual pins over him. Of course, all of them got broken up. But, I mean, they basically had Roman beaten on like 3 straight occasions in this match. From all three opponents. AJ still takes one of the best back body drop bumps I've ever seen. How old is that guy now? Early 40s? Mid 40s? Fuck, I remember when he was taking those backdrop bumps in those X Division matches in TNA years ago. How the hell is he still doing that? That guy's a machine. I also noticed this toward the end, and again, maybe this is me overanalyzing things. Kind of looked like Orton hurt his shoulder giving LA Knight that middle rope DDT. Did anyone else catch that? Like, he was really favoring that through the rest of the match. Constantly grabbing at it, trying to shake it off. Like, you could kind of see him mouthing something to himself too. He's like, fuck. Like, I don't know if he dislocated it or what happened, but, I mean, Orton's not numb to shoulder injuries or muscle tears for that matter. And that collarbone injury fucked him up royally years ago. And he's had some pretty rough upper body issues since that point. On and off. I mean, I hope that isn't anything too severe. I mean, he literally just came back within the last few months. I hate to see the guy sidelined for another 6 months because of that. You know, most of the drama here was built around the near falls, which is usually how these matches go. Solo interfering was very prophetic. You know, but at least his involvement was kept mostly brief. He got in, did his shit, got out, and, I mean, most of it was rendered meaningless anyway because the match kept going. But again, man, this is exactly how I anticipated it would go. It was every 4-way you've ever seen in wrestling in the last 20-something years. Everyone hit their spots. Roman was by and large a non-factor in the whole thing until the slip on a banana peel finish where Reigns shoved LA Knight into AJ going for the springboard. And then Reigns just speared AJ and pinned him flat. And the finish was exactly that. Flat. Like, the reaction from the fans in the building was like, huh? That was it? Well, that was lame. Indeed it was. And I go back to what I asked when they first booked this match to begin with. Why was it a 4-way? I get that all 3 of these guys have a beef to settle with Roman from previous storylines, but the big draw was always Reigns versus Orton. That's what the people wanted to see. Throwing Knight and AJ in there to muddy the waters up? It's just them adding more bodies for the fuck of it. And this had the same issues that I've had with pretty much every modern four-way match in the last decade. Too much floor brawling, too much reliance on near falls and kickouts, too many periods where guys are just sitting by the ring apron waiting their turn to enter the ring. It's all just so repetitive at this point. Formulaic. Dry. There's no creativity to these matches anymore. Plus, it's every Roman Reigns finish we've seen in the last 3 years. It's kind of run its course by now. I just think people are kind of ready to move on from this whole tribal chief, head of the table, Reigns smashes over everybody booking. I think pretty much everybody's ready to see Cody beat him at Mania and move on. And anything Roman does prior to WrestleMania at this point, it's just going to feel like placeholder. And that brings us to Logan Paul and Kevin Owens for the U.S. title. For the record, the first actual singles match on this entire fucking card. And we were well over 2 hours in. Now, we've been tracking the story on the Friday shows for the last few months, and I'll say this. The finish did not go entirely as I expected, but I actually didn't hate it. And I'll explain why when we get there. The rest of the match, I actually thought it was pretty good, for the most part. Aside from KO forgetting which hand he was supposed to sell at certain points. But it's another textbook example of a celebrity name breaking into the business from outside the boundaries and just getting it. And Logan Paul's that dude. He fucking gets it. He gets professional wrestling. There's no other way to frame it. He didn't have to work the indies for 30 plus years and do all the gymnastic tumbling routines to gain the approval of all the marks just to get a reputation for himself. Fuck that shit, dude. He's got all the tools. The facials, the attitude, the timing. He gets it. And really for him, it's easy. All he has to do is sell for KO. Let Owens do the bulk of the work. Kick this guy's ass for the majority of the match. You let Logan get a little bit of heat by cutting off Owens and working over the hand. And as Logan gets more panic-stricken because he can't find a way to put Owens down, including going to the well with his best move, the Ronnie Garvin-esque knockout punch. You know, that's when he has to rely on the cronies at ringside to help him out. And in this case, it was actually a red herring. Instead of one of Logan's buddies handing him the brass knucks, here come Grayson Fodder and Austin Theory to try to argue with the security at ringside. And that was all a distraction tactic so Theory could feed Logan the knucks on the ring apron. Meanwhile, Owens blocks the shot. He steals the gimmick from Logan and then clocks him with the knuckles. And right as the ref is going to go down to count the 3, he sees the gimmick on Owens' hand. And he waves it off. He disqualifies Owens. And he awards the match to Logan. Perfect. Perfect finish. No one has to do a job. The fans shit on the idea of Logan retaining the belt, but they also get a modicum of comeuppance here when Owens kills Logan after the match and powerbombs him through the announce table. In a way, it's kind of a cop-out finish to make sure nobody has to get their shoulders pinned. But there's nothing wrong with that. Because you know what it does? It leaves the door open if they want to do a rematch with these guys. But this time you can maybe add some kind of no DQ stipulation to make sure the brass knucks are legal. Now, truth be told, I would not be all that enthused to see these guys do a no DQ match because I just kind of know the tendency of how those matches tend to go. Like, even a cage match would be better fitting. But I do like the idea of them continuing the feud. Especially if we get more slimy Logan Paul promos on TV, calling KO a coward for having to resort to cheating to bail out of their match. That kind of shit will get over like wildfire, dude. So we'll see where they go with this. The match itself wasn't anything to write home about up until the last few minutes. Logan's still a hell of an athlete. He does probably rely a little too much on the big dives and the aerial stunts when he ought to be probably keeping things more grounded since he's a heel. It's always been a pet peeve of mine. I'm not really a fan of bad guys using flashy moves when they don't have to, especially when they know it's going to get a pop. But that's probably my only critique about the actual match. This was probably one of the bigger highlights in the entire show looking back. But that brings us to the main event. The Men's Royal Rumble match. Will Cody finish the story? Will CM Punk ruin said story? It's what the whole thing was built around primarily. Well, that and all the various records that Michael Cole had to keep mentioning throughout the match. They actually had a new one this year where they put up timers to show how long people had lasted in the match. As if anybody's supposed to give a shit. Kind of like how I don't care about most of the Royal Rumble records they blurt out on a whim. The only thing I care about is who wins. Like a normal, sane wrestling fan that doesn't get hung up on stats. Right, Tony Khan? So much like the girls' match, the men's rumble was pretty similar in layout. You had a few central themes and stories going on at various points. Had a lot of names in there. Definitely more star power than on the girls' side of the equation, but and there were still plenty of duds in there too. I thought them starting with Jimmy and Jey Uso was kind of interesting. I know they're on opposing side of the fences with Raw and SmackDown now, but there's definitely some bad blood between those two. Remember, Jimmy was the one that cost Jey the Universal title at last year's SummerSlam. So these guys still have some unsettled business. Andrade returning was a thing that happened. I don't think it really resonated with the fans here because, a lot of them weren't even watching WWE like 3 years ago when Andrade got released. This one was more of a shout out to all the smart fans. Again, though, man, so much of this was just kind of void filler in terms of name power. Like, until the ring started filling with guys like Cody and Drew and Gunther and Damian Priest, later on Punk and Sammy, everyone else was either lower tier or middle card status at best. And people pop for certain guys they liked, but you never actually thought for a second they stood a chance of winning. Like, really, until the last six of Priest, Zayn, Gunther, Drew, Punk, and Cody, the other names were totally worthless. Seeing Rollins and Reigns up in the skybox was a cool visual. Especially when they panned to Paul and Roman. Paul's just admiring Roman's beautiful face while he's clutching the world title. And they did like 3 or 4 different shots to the same area. Every single time they put the camera on Paul, he was just lost in Roman's eyes. I can't even begin to explain how unsettling this was as a viewer watching, much less thinking what I would have done if I was in Roman's shoes. I'd have bitch slapped that guy in the face and told him to stop being a creep. But then again, it's Paul E. We had some more bad R-Truth comedy here. That all sucked. I did enjoy seeing Braun Breaker show up in Rec Shop for a while. Glad to see they were giving him a big showcase here. And he looked good too. Hitting the ropes like a fucking torpedo. Spearing guys like a linebacker. That shit looked awesome. Yeah, I figured he was only there to do a few spots and then get dumped, which is basically what happened. But he looked good in there for the short time he was active. I'm really hoping they consider calling him up full-time after Mania, because, I mean, that guy's been spinning his wheels in NXT long enough. If anybody on that roster is ready for a call-up, Braun Breaker should get top priority. But once it boiled down to the Faithful Six, like I mentioned a minute ago, this is where I actually kind of started getting more invested. Mostly in the sense that even if I kind of knew in the back of my head that Cody was winning, that CM Punk curveball kind of threw me off course a little bit. I wasn't entirely sold that Cody was going over at that point, especially once it came down to him and Punk exclusively. And they did pay the story off of Punk eliminating Drew. Those guys kind of had a running story going on throughout the match. I'd be shocked if we don't end up seeing those two face off in a singles match down the road. Cody eliminating Gunther for the second year in a row got a massive pop. Again, a lot of tension between those guys. It's been left unresolved. I would not roll out the idea of them doing Cody versus Gunther for maybe a title for title, winner take all match at some point in 2024. Be that at SummerSlam or maybe a little later on in the fall. That could be a really intriguing match. But when it really comes down to it, Cody and Punk were the only two probable winners here. And they milked the fuck out of the last few minutes with those guys going back and forth. Teasing eliminations. The crowd was mildly lukewarm for what Punk was doing. But when Cody had Punk on the brink of trouble, these people were on their feet ready to blow a gasket. They really wanted Cody to win this. And what they did together was good. I love that Punk kept getting more frustrated every time Cody fought back and avoided getting thrown out. And the real story of the finish was the moment Punk looked at the crowd and said, I didn't wait 10 years just to lose to Dusty's kid. And right as he goes to pick up Cody for the GTS, Cody picks the ankle. He looks Punk in the eyes. Punk's got that oh shit expression on his face. And Cody grabs him by the back of the head, dumps him out to the floor. Cody's the Rumble winner. Super massive pop for that. I would say the people came unglued. And, I think it's what a lot of people figured would happen anyway. I think Punk being the final elimination was that much more liberating for the fans because, for the real Cody diehard fans out there, Punk was truly the one major obstacle standing in the way of Cody fulfilling his story, basically. He was the one guy that when he came back at Survivor Series, people were like, this kind of changes the course a little bit here. It might not be as conclusive as we thought. The one guy people figured, well, Punk does stand a fair chance of winning the Rumble. If anybody could fuck up Cody's story, it's that guy. Love him or hate him. But they stayed the course. They had Cody be the sole survivor. And, well, he didn't hesitate to call out Roman before the end of the show. Pointed him in the skybox going, I want you. And then he pointed to the WrestleMania sign like everybody does. It's become the Royal Rumble stable. Everybody has to point at the sign and pose on the top turnbuckle. Such a stupid fucking corporate thing. But everybody's bound by law to do so. I want to see the year somebody goes against the script. Instead of pointing at the sign, they flip at the bird. That'd be fucking awesome. Maybe Punk can do that next year. But all in all, really good last 5 minutes. I like seeing Cody and Punk as the final two. I don't dispute the notion of Cody winning the Rumble for a second year in a row. The only other talent to do that, I believe, was Steve Austin, and oh no, I can't remember what year it was. Fuck. It was 98, 99, right? He won 3 Royal Rumbles, didn't he? Not in back-to-back-to-back years, but, nah. Can't remember off the top of my head. I'll Google it later. And, you know, you're going to have the anti-Cody fans out there that are going to shit all over it because they hate this whole 2-year saga of Cody finishing the story, fulfilling his dream. I personally don't mind it. I think it's some of the better all-around storytelling WWE's done in a very long time, especially when it comes to their world title picture. I think the only thing that would negate all this is if Cody lost again, which, I mean, I know Vince isn't there, so the odds of that are slim to none. God, with WWE, how do you predict anything? I'm also not sure how this sets up the Elimination Chamber next month. Now, the one thing I didn't talk about with Seth is the injury he sustained on Raw the other week. And they said it wasn't anything too severe, but I mean, I saw he was wearing the knee brace. I don't know how that affects their current WrestleMania plans. I have to imagine they're heavily monitoring that situation. If there is a plan B in store, they may not want to completely do away with it. Because if Punk's going to be the one to challenge for the other world title, I'm hoping Seth recovers to where he's able to wrestle that match at 100%. From a character standpoint and a storyline standpoint too, I don't think it would really make much sense for Punk to go into that match with the mobility advantage. Unless they wanted to flip Punk heel sooner rather than later. But we'll see where that all goes. Right now, I think the game plan is still to do Punk and Rollins for the Raw title. So for the people all bent out of shape that Punk didn't win here, don't fret. They got plenty of other world championships to go around. And these days, just about everybody in a major American promotion has a fucking world title of some description. Just look at AEW. But that's kind of my general take on the Rumble. Aside from the length of the show, it just seemed like another paint-by-numbers Royal Rumble event. They had their yearly formula. It's all pretty status quo at this point. The card wasn't really anything to write home about. I wouldn't say there were any match of the year contenders on this thing. But they did what they needed to do to cement their 2 major world championship programs for Mania. The rest of the show is typical boring WWE booking 101. And the one thing that's becoming scarier and scarier is the lack of talent depth outside the main event picture. You remove the Codys and the Punks and the Ortons and the Romans of the world, this whole new crop of NXT talent they're bringing up from out of the woodwork. I am absolutely petrified for the future of this company if this is the best they have to offer. And we'll just leave it at that. So, Retro Raw. At least I watched the right episode this time. That was about the only good news to come out of this one. Because then I watched the January 30th episode of Retro Raw from 1995. And boy did it suck. Remember the other week, there were like those 2 really good TV matches we got on Raw? I was like, holy shit, this is great. We actually got a moderately good Retro Raw for once. Well, it was right back into the gutters this week. And you want to know the best part? The entirety of the show centered around an angle they shot at the pay-per-view from the previous week. An angle that I completely neglected to talk about because that is how little it actually stuck with me after having watched it. Spoiler, that angle becomes a critical story development for WrestleMania 11. I should also mention, when was that angle shot? The 1995 Royal Rumble pay-per-view that we literally just recapped 1 week ago. And what angle am I referring to specifically? I am referring to the Bam Bam Bigelow Lawrence Taylor shoving incident. Something they actually tried to play serious. They even went so far as to have Vince use his somber, stern voice to apologize to all the fans for the unprofessionalism of Bam Bam. So as punishment for his actions, not only was Bam Bam being suspended for 30 days in storyline, but he also had to issue a public apology on the show tonight. So just to recap, 1 week after we literally just saw Shawn Michaels win the 1995 Royal Rumble match, you know, the guy that is now earning a world title match at WrestleMania with Diesel, that has already taken a backseat to the real important Royal Rumble fallout. Bam Bam Bigelow and Lawrence Taylor's worked shoot fight. Should have seen the writing on the wall right there. The moment we all realized, ha! Yeah, Shawn ain't main eventing WrestleMania this year. Lo and behold, look what happened. He was second fiddle on the card to Lawrence Taylor, the real celebrity. And the burial treatment continued as we go into the ring for our opening match. While Emperor Mabel's god-awful music is playing, we get Shawn trying to cut the promo over the loud blasting music, attempting to indicate to the fans that he actually won the 1995 Royal Rumble. Because, you know, that was kind of important. And, well, not only was the promo totally inaudible by and large, but then they immediately glossed over it so Vince could then put over Mabel's oddly shaped KKK gold hood. Again, I have to repeat this because it's so weird. Shawn Michaels, the 1995 Royal Rumble winner, completely swept under the rug. And then we get this absolutely abhorrent semi-Royal Rumble match of our own. It's Mabel versus King Kong Bundy, where the only way to win is to throw your opponent over the top rope. With both feet touching the floor, obviously. You know, after we had already seen Mabel get eliminated from the Royal Rumble, not just 1 week ago. During this escapade, we had Shawn referring to both of these men as fat tubs of goo on multiple occasions. This, I think the whole thing wound up going like 5 minutes. It was the longest 5 minutes in the history of documented timekeeping. It was about 4.5 minutes of slow plotting action until IRS and Tatanka ran in to just blatantly help Bundy dump Mabel out to the floor. Right in front of the referee. And then they got run off by Luger and Mo. Why in the fuck did they wait almost 5 full minutes to help eliminate Mabel? why not just run in from the opening bell and save us all the time and torture? Been doing us a favor. Well, the answer is this is Raw from 1995, so, the torture was part of the package deal. And that was more or less a buffer setup before we got to the Bam Bam Bigelow apology clip. And, well, it went about as you'd expect. Vince is basically spending the entire time admonishing Bam Bam for his actions, trying to get him to rationalize why he shoved Lawrence Taylor. Like he just committed an act of murder. And Bam Bam basically scolded LT for laughing in his face after he just lost the WWF Tag Title match to Bob Holly and the 1-2-3 Kid. When he stuck his hand out, it wasn't sincere. So Bam Bam gave him a piece of his mind. Says he doesn't care about the 30-day suspension or anything that happens between now and then, but he is issuing the challenge to Taylor for a fight anytime, any place. And again, I want to remind you all, they're treating this like Bam Bam just committed a heinous crime. Like he went out, broke into his home, killed his dog, and then made his wife and kids watch. He pushed Lawrence Taylor to the ground. This is not a revolutionary wrestling angle that has never been previously seen in the business. Even by 1995. Of all things for Vince to treat as serious on this fucking program, Bam Bam shoving a celebrity athlete. No, I can't have that. That is pushing the boundaries too far, brother. Crossing the line. Now, they were definitely taking it more seriously than Hakushi versus Ricky Santana, where the only thing I got out of it was Shawn putting himself over at the expense of Hakushi's athleticism, saying, "Did Hakushi win the Royal Rumble?" And Vince nonchalantly goes, "Hakushi wasn't in the Royal Rumble, Shawn." There's a momentary pause. And then Shawn just goes, "Well, there you go. You're not in. You can't win." And then Vince passingly moves on, probably rolling his eyes on the headset. That was, in fact, probably the best part of the entire show. Like Vince just scoffing at Shawn, going into business for himself. It's actually probably the only redeeming quality about HBK as a color commentator. They also took turns arguing over the pronunciation of Hakushi's manager, Shinja. Sure. We'll go with that. I already talked about how I had no memory of Hakushi's WWF run in 95. After several appearances, seeing it happen in real time again, I can now easily confirm it is equally forgettable. And Hakushi won with a botched cartwheel / moonsault out of the corner. It was way too long and way too boring for me to write anything else down, aside from Shawn and Vince arguing. And then after their encore feature plug for the WWF Royal Rumble pay-per-view, which I strongly would have discouraged anybody from pre-ordering, we came back for some more hideous ring action, featuring the Portuguese Man of War. I actually wrote down Aldo Montoya versus some fat guy in a blue jumpsuit that I don't think was ever identified. I mean, the match was already in progress by the time they came back from commercial. From what we did see, it was no good. I was mainly distracted by Montoya's jockstrap covering his face, but he won with a corner bulldog. Have I mentioned how much these gimmicks are death TV? Can't overstate that enough. Like, think about this. just within the last 15 minutes on this program, we've seen Men on a Mission's Mabel, the $1 Million Corporation, and all their wacky misfit of bad guy goons, Hakushi, and now Aldo Montoya. The only thing missing at this point was Doink and the Midget Clowns. They had to have the whole dog and pony show out there. So following that, speaking of dog and pony shows, we had another one of these Why Are the King's Court segments still a thing? Segments. And it does seem like with each passing one, they become more and more generic and placeholder. I mean, at this point, they're not even really designed to build up anything for Lawler. A lot of the time, he's just standing there with a microphone making snide remarks. And this is really no different with his interview with Bob Backlund. The segment where I officially declared that someone needs to yank the headset off of Shawn or hit the mute button. Because, God, was he fucking annoying in this segment. So first of all, Mr. Backlund's suit. Let's talk about that for a minute. Am I the only one that thought the only single thing propping this man's neck up right now is the dress shirt? If you don't believe me, either go watch the show or try to obtain footage of seeing Mr. Backlund in a full suit. His neck. I don't even know how to describe it. It's literally like the only thing holding his head in place was the collar. If he would have undid the bow tie or unbuttoned the top button on his shirt, I think his head would have just fallen to the floor. It was so bizarre how bulbous this man's neck was. It did not fit the rest of his body. That was my first thought. And then the rest of it was Lawler mocking the idea that Backlund could ever get the chicken wing hold on him. To which, surprise, surprise, Backlund does. And Lawler immediately gives up and screams, "I quit, Mr. Backlund." And that was mainly done so Backlund would let go and tease walking away before Lawler tried to walk it back by saying, "What I meant was, I was going to quit this interview segment if Backlund didn't let go of the chicken wing hold." And then, Backlund went back to give chase to Lawler. And that was pretty much it. So is Mr. Backlund a babyface again? Out of the blue? For no reason? Better yet, why are we teasing a Mr. Backlund versus Jerry Lawler feud when we know the Mania build is for Backlund and Brett? Beats the hell out of me. Yeah, I don't really understand what was going on here. Again, just more ways for them to kill time. I mean, these King's Court segments are becoming turn the channel heat for me with each passing week. And I have nothing against Lawler personally, but they're just beyond pointless segments. They're like 3 to 5 minutes. They never accomplish anything. Yeah, it's fun to hear the King make sarcastic comments, but I don't know, the whole thing's just so redundant at this point. But, on the other hand, we all know WWF loves their talk show segments. So I guess that's why it's a common recurrence. Just like how the Miz TV became a recurring talk segment in WWE for years. Or, what was the other stupid one I used to rag on? Is it Carlito's Cabana? Or, no, what was Grayson Fodder's dorky talk show segment they've seen to mercifully drop? That one sucked too. With the fucking palm trees everywhere. I'm glad someone finally came to their senses there. Well, in any case, we arrive at the so-called feature match for the week. A title rematch, in fact, from the previous episode. And since we did not review the Fallout Raw the other week, the night after the 1995 Royal Rumble, we missed this little event. The completely random, unnecessary WWF tag title switch. Yes. After we literally just saw Bob Holly and the 1-2-3 Kid win the belts the night before in the tournament finals, one night later, they dropped the belts to, of all teams, the Smoking Guns. Now, before I get ahead of myself, let's go ahead and establish the backstory first. I sort of remember this being a thing when they were haphazardly running down the brackets for all the WWF Superstar shows. So at some point in the tournament, the Smoking Guns were taken out, injured. I don't really remember what happened. The point was, Bob Holly and the 1-2-3 Kids stepped in and took their spot. They called them like replacement fill-ins or something. And they finished the tournament and won the straps, as we all know from watching the Rumble pay-per-view. So, less than 24 hours later, Billy and Bart are granted their official title opportunity, since they couldn't compete in the tournament to begin with. And then the Guns just won the belts. So now a week later, they're doing the rematch. I guess so Holly and the Kid could get their chance to win them back. Important to note, too, it is a babyface match. So the crowd's already kind of lukewarm going in because they don't really know exactly who to cheer for. And they like the 1-2-3 Kid, but I think that was more so a reflection of the flashy offense. And considering all the stuff we missed the other week, it actually took me a minute here to realize, oh yeah, Billy and Bart were the defending champions going in. I had totally forgotten that Holly and the Kid lost the belts the night after the Rumble pay-per-view. The most unmemorable, forgettable tag title reign in the history of the mid-90s. Well, one of many to come. Especially when we jump to the Attitude Era stuff and there's just random fucking belt switches every week with makeshift tag teams. So the match here, the main story was everything that happened at the end, but up until the abrupt finish, it was just kind of a match. A lot of cold tags between both parties. And again, I think that's more so a reflection on the babyface versus babyface dynamic. For a lot of it, Holly and the Kid were working more as the babyfaces in peril. And they end up doing the so-called hot tag where the Kid gets to run wild for a short stint. And then right as he goes up for the somersault cannonball from the middle rope, Billy Gunn moves out of the way. The Kid comes right down on top of his upper back and shoulder. You know, and that's the point where they show him convulsing on the mat and selling it like he's in rough shape. And they did pretty much call off the match right then and there. And they declared the Smoking Guns the winners by forfeit. Yes, a seizure angle on WWF Raw in 1995. Bryan Danielson would be proud. It's kind of a lame duck finish, but I guess it's a way to give them an outing so Waltman and Holly didn't have to do another job. It was just kind of disappointing that they're having the match and then all of a sudden, boom, just ends in the middle of the fucking comeback. But they brought out the doctors and the medical team. No stretcher job, because then they come back from commercial and then Vince informs us that the 1-2-3 Kid walked out on his own feet. You know, and they were putting over the courage and the guts it took to get out of a situation like that. It was a fine angle. I I think that was also more of a way for them to silently move the 1-2-3 kid away from Bob Holly and this little makeshift team they were doing. Because I remember he eventually starts teaming up with Razor later in the year. And then, of course, in the fall, he turns heel and they start going in a completely different character direction with him. But, yeah, even at this point, they're kind of still running with the scrappy underdog babyface story. I think Vince was kind of seeing the writing on the wall a little bit, like, yeah, you know, been there, done that. It's kind of running its course. So, at least he was wise enough to catch on to it a little later on in the year. He definitely could have used a change of pace, so to speak. And then with about 3 minutes left in the show, we get the TV debut of the new Kama gimmick going up against Jumbo Beretta. This was one of many Kama gimmick incarnations. This happened to be the short-lived bare-knuckle fighter/motorcycle street thug gimmick. And after this performance, I see why the gimmick was not meant to last. The match was mind-numbingly boring. The crowd was sitting on their hands the entire time. My entire note-taking for this reads as follows. Kama did some MMA strikes and kicks. He did some boring mat work for a while. The fans were all taking collective naps. And then he finally hit a belly-to-belly and one with a modified camel clutch. Dreadful. Kind of sums up the entire show as a whole this week, doesn't it? I mean, beyond the angle with the 1-2-3 kid and that tag match with the guns, what was the takeaway this week? Bam Bam's feud with Lawrence Taylor? Jerry Lawler running scared from Mr. Backlund? How about that Aldo Montoya match? Yeah, that was really fucking bringing the house down. Or the Mabel King Kong Bundy slugfest. Yeah, that was some riveting programming. Yeah, this show really had nothing much of value, did it? I got done watching it and completely dropped it into the memory bank. And I need to remind you, this is how the WrestleMania 11 build is beginning. Now, I know that show is infamously bad. Like WrestleMania 9 caliber bad. You know, like I didn't get a chance to review WrestleMania 9 here on the channel when we started the Retro Raw series. Like, we were already well into the summer by that point. Man, if I really wanted to tempt myself, I could do like a side-by-side analysis of WrestleMania 9 and 11. Try to figure out which one was truly worse. My gut tells me it's a toss-up, but, you know, at least I remember a lot of bad things about WrestleMania 9. 11's just kind of a blur, which, you know, probably makes it that much worse. The fact that it's both terrible and hideously unmemorable. But we'll stew on that for a later date. For now, let's turn our attention over to NXT from this week in history. This is January 29th, 2014. A lot of big stuff they're building up to over the next month. Their inaugural NXT Takeover special on the 27th of February. Which up to this point, they still haven't even called Takeover yet. There I go again. Just blurting out spoilers and not even being ashamed about it. But, yeah, that's mainly the focus of a lot of the story material on the TV shows as of late. Last week, they set things in motion for the Bo Dallas Adrian Neville feud. After celebrating the 224-day title reign of Bo as champion, they had Hunter Grand Neville a chance to wrestle Bo for the belt on the 27th of February if he could last 4 minutes and 45 seconds with Bo in the ring. And that's exactly what happened. And we had some more follow-up with that later in the program, which we'll get to. We also had the story development in the Cesaro-Sami Zayn rivalry, where Sami issued the challenge to Cesaro, but he got declined. So we'll see how that progresses on the show. First, let's talk about our opening bout this week. It is the Ascension going over Q-Ball, T. Marshall, and Johnny Come Lately, or whatever the guy's name was. Announcer's already giving them the burial treatment by saying, "Yeah, I don't know too much about these guys." Just totally undercutting any chance of QT Marshall ever being taken seriously in his career. And he never was. This was the Ascension are supposed to be heels, but the crowd cheers everything they do because they're too badass match. So all logic and psychology goes out the window at that point. Just Connor and Victor smashing over these numbskulls and killing them in short order. If you can ignore the backslap tag from Connor toward the finish. It was a very effective squash. Nothing to complain about. The yaw chants are ever present in the building. Was that a stable of the Ascension's gimmick? I don't ever remember yaw being one of their catchphrases. Come to think of it, I can't even recall the last time I heard these guys cut a promo. Maybe it's just something the fans did to amuse themselves. It was very odd. I also dug Victor's all-black contacts. He looked quite spoopy. Especially when they dim the stage lights and you can see the reflection of the contacts. That was a cool look. And then they follow that with the obligatory cable access acting backstage skit. Here we had Sylvester LaFour hosting auditions for something. I believe to find out who was going to be his next client. And they actually did several of these skits throughout the program. They all sucked. First guy they brought in here was some dork named Cal Bishop. And he got denied because he had cauliflower ear. You know, I'm thinking if he said the same thing to Brock Lesnar, he'd have been killed on the spot. But since it's Cal Bishop, he just kind of left the room like a geek. And then we came back for the return of Corey Graves to television. He had been out dealing with a series of concussion issues following his 2 out of 3 falls match with Adrian Neville last year. And this would not be his first rodeo, as we would all come to find out soon enough. He wound up dealing with a multitude of concussion problems throughout this year, basically forcing him into retirement before not too long. And, well, he's still Corey Graves. The Pearl of the Underground. Whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean. Kind of sums up Corey Graves' entire gimmick. Because I never understood what the fuck that guy was supposed to be. Aside from a boring, tattooed, mediocre wrestler who could sometimes cut a halfway decent promo. I'm ashamed to hear he was a resident of Pittsburgh. Forgot about that. Well, in any case, he wrestled Camacho this week. Camacho, who came out riding on his pedalless golden bicycle. Could you be any lamer? Not even a dirt bike. A fucking child's bicycle. And this dude was easily like 6'2", 6'3". Looked like such an idiot. He was also wrestling in red Converse shoes. Yeah. He was better off in New Japan. Corey went over with Lucky 13 in like 90 seconds. He still sucks. I don't care what the marks say. That was followed with a Cesaro interview with whoever he called Devin here. I know she corrected him. And then he just kind of blew it off and was like, yeah, whatever. So she asked him why he denied Sammy a rematch. And Cesaro was basically like, because I already beat him. I've nothing to prove. He should just take no for an answer and accept it. And he basically blew off the rest of the promo and said, you know, come to think of it, I don't know why I'm explaining any of this. I've got better things to do. It was actually a relatively decent promo. And I know Claudio was never considered the most gifted on the microphone. But hey, he at least sounded like a normal human being here. He wasn't regurgitating scripted word salad like so many of these other people are. And, you know, I actually kind of like how they're going about doing this. You know, even if we want to sit here and claim that Cesaro's afraid to wrestle Sammy again, the fact is, he did already beat him. So really, aside from just being a dick, why would he accept the rematch? What's his incentive? Just to appease Sammy's ego? It's like, yeah, I'm pretty confident I could beat the guy again. I could accept the challenge. But you know, I'm just not going to because I'm an asshole. I love it. It's the kind of thing a pompous, condescending heel would do. Now it's basically left to Sammy to get under Cesaro's skin enough to goad him into accepting the challenge. Thumbs up. What was not a thumbs up was Sylvester Lefort getting hit on by gay men. That was how you say thumbs down. Bad, bad television. As was Bayley versus Sasha Banks, which was the next match that unfortunately perpetrated our television monitors. And you know, it's funny too, because I'm pretty sure these are the same two girls that had that classic Iron Man match like a year or two later that people still rave about to this day. This was not that match. Far from it. In fact, this was really gruesome to sit through. Not just because of the ring action, but more so the commentary. Renee Paquette, dude. You know, the more and more I hear her speak, the more I start to think she's one of the most overrated female announcers of all time. Like, I remember people were so elated when AEW signed her as a backstage interviewer. And everyone was like, oh man, this is great. She's going to bring so much life and energy to these interview segments. Dude, every time I hear her on these old NXT shows as the fill-in color girl, I'm like begging for Michael Cole to run in and yank the fucking headset off of her. She's so goddamn annoying. Although she did say one truthful thing here. Even Renee Paquette was smart enough here to acknowledge this universal fact. She said, and I quote, so no one can call me a misogynist for the statement I'm about to make, because she said it first. Women have a harder time controlling their emotions than men. Yeet. Accurate. Very accurate. So yeah, this match sucked. Way too much screaming from Sasha. her entire offense, bro. I'm going to get so much shit for this. But I have to be that guy. Just because I'm the only person on the internet, apparently, that likes to point out the cold, hard facts. Or just outright has the balls to do so. Sasha Banks' offense is so fucking rotten. She does every prissy, prancy diva antic in the book. Up to the hair pulling and the cat scratching. Those fucking weak-ass looking running stomps she did to Bayley's back. I would actually bet money that Riho could do more spinal damage. Sasha's like what? 5 feet tall, 100 pounds soaking wet. I mean, she looks like a twig to begin with. Bayley looks like she should have an easy time smashing her in like 5 seconds. You know, Bayley, even at this point, was pretty small herself. She definitely didn't have as much muscle tone as she does now. God, this is terrible. I mean, I did like at the end seeing Natty pull Charlotte off the ring apron and Charlotte totally ate shit. That was funny. But, yeah, Bayley kicked out of a schoolgirl attempt and then immediately turned around and beat Sasha with a belly-to-belly like 3 seconds later. I mean, the whole thing was mostly designed to advance the feud between Charlotte and Bayley, since they already kind of teased out when Charlotte turned heel several weeks back and then aligned with Summer Rae and Sasha. I actually kind of forgot about that until I saw Bayley going after Charlotte. And then I remembered, oh yeah, she did kind of turn heel on Bayley not that long ago. I mean, they really just haven't drawn much attention to it. No, instead they've been subjecting me to torturous Summer Rae Sasha Banks matches. Again, remember people, Sasha is the current free agent that all the basement dwellers want to sign with the big major American companies right now. You know, now that she's done with her touring vacation in New Japan, where she made absolutely no impact on the business as a whole. Now they want her back in either AEW or WWE to be that much less relevant. Internet fans. Gotta love them. So then Big Cass wrestled Tyler Breeze. Yet another case where the 7-foot massive giant is doing jobs to guys he outweighs by at least 80 pounds and towers over by at least 10 to 11 inches. You go figure that one out. In the land of the giants. So after about 5 minutes of them stalling with Big Cass mocking Tyler Breeze by taking selfies on the floor, they finally rang the bell to actually start the match. You know, after they got their bad sports entertainment shenanigans out of the way. And they wrestled for approximately 2 more minutes until the sports entertainment shenanigans continue. This time with Aiden English showing up on the jumbo screen for the obligatory, let's direct the stupid babyface's attention away from the match to watch me cut a promo on screen for about an hour. And, well, that was mainly done so Aiden could walk into Enzo and Cass's dressing room and presumably beat up Enzo in his wheelchair. Although we didn't actually see what happened at the time. Could have been anything from laying him out to duct taping his mouth shut to kidnapping him to anal probing. Who knows? And we've seen so much stupid shit in wrestling over the years. I really don't put anything past these writers. But of course, the video feed cuts out right at the moment Breeze hits Cass with a spinning heel kick. So, yeah, Cass loses. And then he immediately hits the bricks to go check on his fallen brother. And actually, as it turned out, it was a swerve. And by the way, it was not a locker room that Aiden broke into. It was, I don't even know. It kind of looked like the break room. Definitely wasn't catering. But there was a kitchen in the background, little dining table, giant fridge. So, I don't know where the fuck these guys were. So that brings up a good question. How did Aiden know Enzo was there? Did he just follow him around backstage and then watch him go in? Well, on the other hand, Enzo was a pretty loud, obnoxious guy. I could see how easy it would be to identify his location. Anyway, they did some goofy comedy stuff here that was moderately amusing. Talking about Aiden's mind game bullshit. Cass joked that this isn't a game of chess. To which Enzo goes, I never played chess. And then as Cass started rattling off a bunch of other board games, Enzo would keep interjecting by going, how you doing? And then finally Cass told him to shut up. And then the payoff was Cass leaving the room, presumably to go hunt down Aiden. And while Enzo was cheering him on, he realized that the battery on his wheelchair died. So he was stuck there. Okay, that was at least moderately funny. It actually gets hokier by the week. The fact that I have no idea what the fuck Enzo's talking about in his promos, but he says everything so convincingly. It's like listening to a Jimmy Valiant promo. I wish the guy could have kept his head on straight. He should have been a much bigger star in the business than he ended up being. But he was a screwball. Kind of hard to defend him. You know who ended up becoming a bigger star in the business? It was C.J. Parker. But it wasn't a C.J. Parker. It was finally after he ditched this rotten hippie gimmick and changed his name to Juice Robinson. What a career turnaround. For the better. So he wrestled The Miz this week, stemming from their altercation the other week where I believe a challenge was issued. Kind of hard to tell when Parker's talking about Miz's toxic fumes and his expulsion of CO2 or whatever the fuck he was talking about. Call me old school. I'm a fan of promos that don't involve hyperbole and just get straight to the point. I don't like your face. I don't like your gear. I don't like your ring style. So I want to fight you. It's at least direct, easy to digest. I mean, the match here was kind of whatever. It was fine. Not all that engaging. It was steadily back and forth for a lot of it. Juice's offense looked pretty good. I never liked babyface Miz. I always kind of thought that dynamic was off. I was also never a fan of long hair Miz. That was not a good look. I mean, pretty much everything about the babyface heel dynamic here was just kind of weird. I mean, CJ Parker's a dead-in-the-water gimmick. Everybody could see that. At this point, they're just slowly trying to kill the thing off. Miz went over with a figure four. And then Parker threw a temper tantrum afterwards. I really don't remember what they do with this gimmick going forward. If they ever give Juice a gimmick repackage before he winds up leaving the company later in the year. But this is pretty much designed to put Miz over and keep the downfall of CJ Parker going. Probably one of the rare cases where I actually advocate them putting Miz over. Hate to say it, but I mean, at least he was a main event star. Like, this CJ Parker thing is so bad. They couldn't even get the diehard NXT loyalists to care about him. And they were mostly internet marks to begin with. That's how bad this shit was. So, now before the main event, we finally got the payoff to all this Sylvester LaFour nonsense. He was confronted by Mason Batista Ryan. And he told LaFour that if he can beat him in a match next week, he'll work for him. Yep. That was the multiple segment payoff to LaFour's recruitment angle. He denied one guy, got hit on by another, and then challenged to a match by Mason Ryan. I'm beyond jubilant. I cannot wait. Actually, I'm lying. But that brings us to the contract signing between Neville and Dallas. Actually, what wound up being a multifaceted contract segment. It begins with Neville coming out to sign his name on the contract. But Dallas no-shows the initial confrontation. So Neville gives the paperwork to Renee and tells her to go hand it to Dallas because he's apparently too scared to come out and do it face-to-face. This is also where I noted Neville's entire back of his polo was soaked with water from his hair. Looked like a giant piss stain running down the back of his neck. But eventually out comes Bo, and he's walking with a purpose. He immediately gets in Neville's face and tells him he's not scared, in fact. He's come dressed for competition this week just to prove that he's a fighting champion. So they send out Danny Burch as Bo's opponent, which was, it was just a squash win to give Bo a TV win. The fans were chanting Bo Ring to try to get under his skin, but and there really wasn't much to the match. Neville and Renee were awkwardly sitting in chairs at ringside next to each other. I was half expecting John Moxley to jump out of the crowd and tackle Neville for being within arm's reach of Renee's boobies. But instead, after Bo wins, he tells Neville to come into the ring and give him the contract. And Neville hands him the paperwork. Bo signs it. And then he sucker punched Neville before leaving, which would then turn into Neville jumping Bo in the aisleway, and then those two kind of brawled to close out the show. That was a very weird segment. So the story here, Bo didn't want to sign the contract at first, but then Neville called him a scaredy cat, and that somehow provoked Bo to come out, issue an impromptu challenge, wrestle a full-length squash match, which he won clean, by the way, and then he signed the contract anyway. Didn't try to use a loophole to throw in his own stipulation. Didn't fake Neville out by ripping up the contract and shoving the paper down his throat. Nope. He just signed the paperwork. Really odd. But the match is now official for the 27th of February. And there's obviously one more caveat that will get thrown in there eventually. But at least we know the match is sealed. Soon to be delivered. That was how they went out. This show was a hot mess. And there was plenty of stuff going on this week, but not a lot of it good. There's another episode that fixated a lot on the underneath stuff. Pretty minimal development in the main event scene, outside the contract deal with Bo Dallas and Adrian Neville, which wasn't all that compelling a segment to begin with. Yeah, though. A lot of ups and downs this week. Unfortunately, more downs than ups. But it's kind of a good summation of the 3 different segments we had on this week's Monday edition. But as we wrap this one up and prepare for the Friday show this coming week, again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to check this one out. Next Monday, we'll be back to our regular podcasting format. But it's kind of all I got for this one. So thanks everybody for watching, and take care. Peace out.